You're looking at a building most people will never walk through again. It stands 18 stories tall, covers 9.5 acres, and sits directly next to one of the busiest NFL stadiums in the country. And it is completely abandoned. The structure is intact, it's fully standing. That is precisely what makes this story so strange. It costs $55 million to tear it down. Getting it to basic, habitable condition costs $752 million. America built the greatest stadium ever conceived, then had absolutely no idea what to do with it. Houston in the early 1960s was a city in the middle of a boom. NASA had just established its manned spacecraft center outside the city, oil money was flowing, the population was booming. And in 1960, Houston had landed a Major League Baseball franchise, the Colt 45s, who would later be renamed the Astros. This was a city trying to prove itself on the national stage, and it had a serious problem standing in the way. Houston's summers are brutal. Temperatures regularly climb past 95 degrees. The air sits thick and wet, the kind of heat that soaks through clothing before you reach your seat. And the mosquitoes during evening games were so severe they were becoming a genuine threat to professional baseball attendance. Mayor Roy Hofheinz reached a conclusion that most people around him considered insane. If nature refused to cooperate, you bring the outdoors inside. You build a structure so large it contains its own weather. No one had ever done it before. Hofheinz wanted a dome. The baseball field alone demanded a stadium footprint 710 feet across, larger than 7 regulation football fields, and he wanted to cover the whole thing with a clear span of 642 feet and 0 interior columns. The engineers said it had never been done. His answer? Figure it out. What they built was a steel lattice dome lined with 4,596 translucent lucite skylight panels. At the time of construction, it was the largest clear-span structure ever built. The interior was completely unobstructed, with full sight lines from every seat. Then there was the air conditioning. The Astrodome system moved 2 million cubic feet of air every single minute. The equipment needed its own separate building just to house it. To put that in perspective, that's enough airflow to cycle through the equivalent of an Olympic swimming pool's worth of air in under 3 seconds. On opening night, April 9, 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson attended the exhibition game between the Houston Astros and the New York Yankees. People drove from across Texas just to walk inside and look up. Elvis Presley performed here, as did Judy Garland, and Evel Knievel jumped his motorcycle over 13 cars 2 nights in a row in 1971. In January 1968, the game of the century college basketball matchup between Houston and UCLA drew over 52,000 fans to the Astrodome, widely considered the first nationally televised primetime college basketball game in American history. Roy Hofheinz called it the 8th wonder of the world. People did not come just to watch baseball. They came to look at the ceiling. There was just one problem nobody had anticipated. Those 4,596 skylight panels created a catastrophic glare during daytime games. The geometric pattern of the roof reflected sunlight directly across the outfield, and fielders tracking fly balls were essentially running blind. In the very first exhibition game on April 9, 1965, 5 of the first 7 runs scored came from balls that players simply could not see. The fix seemed obvious. Paint the skylights. The glare disappeared, but without direct sunlight reaching the field, the natural grass began to yellow, then brown, then die completely. By the end of the first season, the Houston Astros were playing on spray-painted concrete. Engineers spent months developing a solution. A surface that looked like grass, performed like grass, required no sunlight and no water to survive. What they invented is in virtually every high school football field, every college stadium, and every major sports complex in America today. They called it AstroTurf, named directly after the building where sheer desperation forced the idea into existence. For 2.5 decades, the Astrodome delivered. The Houston Oilers brought professional football to the building starting in 1968. The Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo grew into one of the largest events of its kind in the world, staged year after year right there under that dome. The Astrodome was a point of civic pride that defined an entire era of Houston identity. But by the early 1990s, the design that had made the building revolutionary was becoming its greatest liability. A circular stadium built to serve both baseball and football is by nature a compromise. For baseball, a third of the seats sit at awkward angles. For football, the circular shape pushes end-zone fans far from the action. Meanwhile, cities across the country were building a new generation of sports-specific stadiums, optimized down to the last sightline and packed with luxury suites and premium club seating. That suite revenue had become essential to how NFL and NBL franchises funded themselves. The Astrodome had almost none of it. Structurally solid, historically remarkable, and financially obsolete. The Houston Oilers demanded a new publicly funded stadium. The city refused. The owner moved the franchise to Tennessee after the 1996 season. The Houston Astros made the same demand, a new baseball-only park with a retractable roof, or they leave. The city agreed. The Astros moved to a new downtown ballpark for the 2000 season. The eighth wonder of the world had no tenants. And Houston was not done losing. Right next to the Astrodome sat Astro World, a beloved theme park that had drawn Houston families for 37 years. It closed in 2005 and was demolished the following year. The lot has sat empty ever since. Houston already knew exactly what demolition grief looked like. After the tenants left, the Astrodome drifted. The Houston Livestock Show and Rodeos stayed through 2002. George Strait performed the last concert inside the dome that year. Over the next few years, the dome sat largely dark. If you grew up in Houston, you almost certainly have a memory inside this building. Astros and Oilers games with your family on a summer evening, the rodeo every spring, concerts and demolition derbies and circuses spanning decades. These were generational experiences tied to a single roof on the south side of the city, and they belonged to everyone who lived there. All of it silent now. The dome that had shaped a generation sat empty, and the argument about what to do with it has never stopped. Then came August 2005. Hurricane Katrina made landfall on the Gulf Coast and obliterated New Orleans. Within hours, the levees broke, and more than 80% of the city was underwater. Houston opened the Astrodome. Over 4 days, approximately 25,000 displaced people arrived. Cots covered the playing field. Medical stations were set up across the concourses. Volunteers came from across Texas. For several weeks, a building that had been largely dark for years became the most important facility in America. It was exactly what Roy Hofheinz had always believed a building like this could be. The evacuees were eventually relocated. The lights went back off. In 2008, the Houston Fire Marshal declared the Astrodome non-compliant with fire safety codes. By 2009, the doors were chained shut, the power was cut to minimum levels, and the building was formally abandoned. The building that had sheltered a city had no one left to shelter. This is not a story about a building that failed. The math is simply extraordinary in a way that makes action nearly impossible. $55 million to demolish it completely, $752 million to bring it back to basic habitable condition. That figure covers only the plumbing, electrical, HVAC and fire safety systems. The estimate excludes design upgrades, historic preservation work and any modern venue features. It is purely the baseline cost of making the building legally safe to enter. This is not a maintenance problem, it's a values problem. The building is locked in place by its own history. In 2014, the Astrodome was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Then in January 2017, the Texas Historical Commission voted unanimously to designate it a state antiquities landmark, placing it alongside the Alamo and the Texas State Capitol under Texas law. Under that designation, Harris County cannot demolish or significantly alter the structure without going through the Texas Historical Commission. The building's own historical significance is the very thing making its salvation harder to achieve. Over the past 15 years, dozens of proposals have been floated and collapsed. A luxury hotel, a movie production studio, an indoor amusement park, a convention center expansion. Each one ran into the wall of cost, politics, or both. In November 2013, voters rejected a $217 million bond proposal that would have converted the Astrodome into a multi-purpose event facility. That was the most realistic plan anyone had put forward in years. It failed at the ballot box. Then, in November 2024, architecture firm Gensler, working with the non-profit Astrodome Conservancy, unveiled the most detailed plan yet. Since revised to an estimated $840 million, the proposal envisions a new arena at the building's core, surrounded by hotel space, offices, restaurants, and a pedestrian boulevard running through the center of the dome, connecting it to the rest of NRG Park. The Conservancy has cited up to $400 million in potential historic tax credits to help close the funding gap. The revenue logic is there on paper, but none of it moves forward until the building first reaches that $752 million baseline. Before a single design element can be constructed, the building has to be safe to enter. And even then, the Gensler plan still doesn't have the support of Rodeo Houston or the Houston Texans, the two tenants whose buy-in any redevelopment of NRG Park actually requires. The Astrodome sits directly in the shadow of NRG Stadium, the $352 million facility built in 2002 that replaced it and rendered it obsolete. They share the same parking lots. One fills every NFL Sunday, the other is used for storage. This is not a monument to failure. It's a monument to a specific kind of American paralysis, the ability to build remarkable things combined with no framework for deciding what to do with them when they outlive their original purpose. The Astrodome proved that engineering vision alone is not a long-term plan. A building has to evolve or it gets left behind. Harris County owns the Astrodome outright. There's no debt on the building. The structure is physically intact. And as of today, no decision has been made. Two genuinely defensible positions exist here. You can argue that taking the demolition route is the responsible call, accepting the loss, freeing the land for something the city actually needs now. You can also argue that spending public money to preserve a building that shaped over 60 years of Houston's identity is exactly what civic investment is for. There may be a third path that nobody has found yet. What would you do with the Astrodome? Leave your answer in the comments below. Subscribe for more mega build stories.